Welcome to the Period Besties Podcast with Stasha and Katie. Think about it as chatting with your best friends about all the TMI stuff you've never talked about before with two period coaches who've been helping hormones collectively for over 20 years now. I'm Stasha.
And I'm Katie, and we're pulling back the curtain on what it's like in the world of menstrual coaching. From puberty to menopause and everything in between, we're here to show you how period coaching can save the day. We'll share practical tips and information you can put to immediate use to improve your hormones and happiness.
We're removing the mystery, ending the taboo, and shining a light on just how powerful period coaching can be.
So whether you need period coaching or are considering becoming a period coach yourself, these episodes are going to help you. We'll share stories, coach live on air, and bring smart, savvy guests to share their wisdom too. Let's start today's episode.
Welcome to the Period Besties Podcast. Today, Katie and I are going to dive into the topic of protein and how it's so important to us and fairly overlooked. But first, Katie, where are you in your cycle today?
So I'm on day 7 of my cycle. I had a pretty good period this past cycle, actually. So I'm very excited. I've been really diligent about my seed cycling, my castor oil pack, really managing stress. So as I mentioned, I can't remember which episode it was, but I was talking about how my cycle had gotten a little bit shorter. So I'm up to 25 days again. So I feel like that's a big improvement over the past, I'll say like 7-8 months now, actually, that I've been like really dialing it in a different way. Because now that I'm in perimenopause, there's a little bit of changes that I've made. So I'm feeling good about this one.
Nice. Yeah, I'm right behind you. I'm day 4 today. I will say that I had some serious insomnia with the full moon and my period at the same time. So there's a lot of naps on day 1 and day 2, or at least resting for sure. I spent both of those days fully on the couch under a heated blanket, but actually not bad. I'm pretty happy with how the symptoms have simmered down quite a bit over the years. And it seems like every year, the longer I'm on this health journey and doing all of these things, the better it does seem to be getting, which also can be age, but also can be all of the health things. So I'm just going to take it as a win.
Yes, win all around.
Yeah. So not bad. A little bit of a headache on day 3, but I just sat outside and stared at the clouds for a while and went to bed early.
I was traveling, so I feel like sometimes when I'm not in my normal routine, I get a little like, ooh, what's going to happen? And I packed my period underwear just because I wasn't, not sleeping in my own bed. I always wear period underwear anyways at night, but I wasn't sure how I was going to show up, but it was good. So
that's nice. In fact, I was debating because I'm going on a wedding dress trying on today. And I was like, do I have a light colored pair of period underwear, or do we just accept the fact that they were all a dark color and hopefully they won't show through and it won't be a weird thing?
Oh, that's so funny. I'm sure you have to go in the very back of the drawer. You've got to have something.
It may just be a pair of like yoga pants that I put on. And I'm like, just for quick changes, I'm wearing a yoga top and pants. And then that'll just be the
good idea. Oh my God, I can't wait to see pictures. You have to send me pictures.
I'll send you pictures. All right. So shall we dive into the topic of protein today?
Yes. So this is such a very, very important topic, and something that I think as Americans, especially, I've noticed, we talk about protein a lot.
Yeah.
But a lot of times we're talking about protein bars, protein drinks, things like that, or protein supplements, protein powders, all of the things, but not necessarily like talking about food in the sense of, are you eating enough protein? So a lot of times when I'm speaking with my clients, like, oh yeah, I do like this energy bar and I do this protein powder. And okay, well, let's look at like the food in terms of animal-based, plant-based protein. Are you getting enough? And even though we talk about it all the time, most of us are still not getting enough protein.
Yeah, we talk about it in context of like working out, making gains, that kind of thing. Often it's not spoken about as to what it really does in your day-to-day life. And it's not just a workout fuel. And don't even get me started on protein powders. I don't know, 1 in every 5 is semi-decent, maybe less. They are riddled with sugars and all sorts of weird stuff. So protein powders is a real navigation. It can be hairy trying to find one that's actually supportive and not also detrimental at the same time. So yeah, my goodness, food, the easiest, best way to get the protein that you need. And I think before we jump into quite all of the nerdy bits and pieces, just kind of talking about what overall, especially for the menstrual cycle, what protein does for us. And it's one of those things that people don't put this together, but it's a part of your blood production. And I mean, there's nothing more obvious to the menstrual cycle than blood production. So making sure you have adequate amount of protein is a really vital part of making our blood and making sure that we have enough and that we're feeling energized. So it is part of how we make our blood process for sure, our blood cells, all that good stuff. The iron intake that you need, right? So a lot of us that feel fatigue, especially around our deep luteal menstrual phases, making sure that you're getting enough protein and therefore iron as well can really make a difference in that feeling energized, or at least not feeling as fatigued, right? So with endometriosis, I have chronic fatigue, and I can tell the difference between like, this is just the endo fatigue, and this is, I did not get enough nutrition fatigue. Like the brain fog goes up a few notches. The fatigue is much more dramatic. So having that nice, steady protein intake can really help with your energy levels because it helps to boost and keep that blood production running smoothly in the body.
Definitely. I hear you on the lack of energy, especially before your period. I always want I love bison. I'm really into bison this past few years.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And I crave it the week before. I'm like, give me all the bison meatballs, give me all the bison burgers. And I notice a huge difference. But also in terms of our work with our clients, when somebody is mentioning low energy, the first thing I go to and I look, it's okay, what are you eating for protein? How much are you getting? And a recent client of mine, we were adding up her macros and she was only getting about 35 grams of protein a day.
Wow.
Just really low. And I was like, okay, I'm not going to diagnose. I'm not a doctor. I'm not going to tell you exactly, you might have other things going on, but let's get your protein. We've got to jump that up a lot and let's see about your energy. And within weeks, she's like, oh my God, I don't feel like I'm going to crash at 2, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I have more energy. So it definitely is so vital for anyone listening that has low energy, which I feel like so many of us experience. Please look at that protein intake.
Absolutely. And I think cravings go hand in hand with that, right? Because when you're feeling satisfied, when you're feeling satiated, when you're feeling nourished, you're not craving as much of the junk. So
100%.
those sugar cravings go down a bit. Those junk food cravings go down a bit when you have really a nourished diet, and protein often is that key missing macro to feeling nourished and satiated, and therefore curbing those cravings. So energy levels, cravings, 2 really good signs that perhaps protein is amiss in your diet.
Yes. And because the protein, what it's doing is it's decreasing that hunger hormone, that ghrelin. I always say that. Hopefully I said that correctly. So it really helps decrease that. So even if you don't know what it's doing in terms of hormone, like which hormone it might be supporting, you notice right away the lack of sugar cravings.
Yeah.
And that's the first thing too. When I start craving sugar, I'm like, okay, what can I grab that's protein, like cashews, almonds, like whatever it is. Then I drink some water. Sometimes I need to get outside, get some sun, get some movement in. But most of the time, just getting that protein in my body. And that goes back to something that you and I have talked about a lot, but that first hour of the morning.
Mm-hmm.
Because protein is one of the best ways to support your blood sugar. And going back to that first hour of your morning and getting enough protein in And this is what I find is so hard for a lot of us, our clients, our listeners, is that one, we've been told that breakfast might not be necessary, like especially with this bulletproof coffee trend that's still not a lot of people might still be doing, but that trend that talk about not having breakfast and just having coffee or just intermittent fasting and just pushing through. But if you're craving sugar, if you have low energy, if you're hangry all the time, if you're having irregular, painful periods, let's go back. Let's look at the protein, because eating within that first hour of the morning, getting enough protein in is game changing for people that have their periods. It really is.
Yeah, it's huge. I completely agree with you. That first meal, right? This is what a lot of the women's wisdom is, to have a really protein heavy breakfast. A guiding force out there is that you want to shoot for 30 grams of protein per meal. You can break it down if you want to. I wrote a blog about protein, so I'm going to cheat and look at my blog post right now because I already did the numbers for that. But so when I first started doing this, I thought, okay, 30 grams of protein, that's not a big deal. But then I started looking it up, and it's really quite interesting. You need 1 gram of protein per kilo of body weight. This is Dr. Laura Brydon's wisdom that I pulled from for that. And so because I'm not in a metric country, neither are you, I did translate that for Americans and I guess our British companions. But for the non-metric people, 150 pounds is about 60 kilograms. So if you are 150 pounds, you would need 68 grams of protein in a day. So if you can get 30 grams of protein in breakfast, then you've basically set yourself up for then the next 2 meals or whatever, however you want to break it down, needing the next, say, 40 grams, right? So let's just round to 70 there. So it does give you that front loading in the morning, which is really good because then that helps curb those cravings throughout the day. It helps keep those energy levels high throughout the day. So all that's really good. And then, yeah, you can figure it out for each individual person about what you need. But I do think that just shooting for 30 grams per meal is a good sort of rule of thumb. And there's just one other thing that I wanted to mention as far as the health issues are concerned, and that it is the long-term effects as well, right? Because we went on in ovulation and our ovulation episode about progesterone and how important that is to your long-term health. And I feel like I can't hammer this home enough because it's something that the sooner you start, the better you are. And I have so many people that I know who are a decade or 2 decades older than me that are going through osteoporosis issues now, bone density issues now, that have all of these problems creeping up. Most likely because they were on birth control for a really long time and didn't get that progesterone over those years, but just not knowing this kind of information and not being able to prepare for it. And that's the fact that protein is important to building muscle density, because muscle density is important to building bone density. And you have these years where you have progesterone flowing when you have that ovulation menstrual cycle. And if you're not getting enough protein, you're also not giving yourself all of that building blocks for older age, right? So again, if we think of it as building your bone density as much as possible until you hit menopause, and then continuing, because that's just good practice, but knowing that post-menopause, those extra boosters like progesterone that help really stockpile are going to ebb away. And so you're not going to be able to stockpile in those later years like you can now. So today is the day to start so that your future you won't be sitting at my kitchen table going, oh, girl, I got my osteoporosis test back and it is not good.
No, I totally, and especially if you're lifting weights, as we all should be doing, lifting those weights, being mindful, don't start with 50 pounds, start small and work your way up. But heavy weights, the bone osteoporosis, all of that stuff. So important. Yeah, it's a really good point.
Yeah. I mean, if you've done nothing, just as a little aside, just starting with some basic yoga, a plank is a great way to start because you've got to build up that muscle mass first. So when I was teaching fitness classes, I wouldn't let people start with weights. I would be like, if you can just get through the arms section with no weights, then you can use a pound. But until you can just get through the whole arm section without quitting, no weights. Once you can do that, then we'll add weights. So like really, truly, if you're coming from zero, which I'm going to say in full transparency, I'm coming from zero. I've been back into yoga the last couple of months and I'm like, whoa, look at this plank for more than 10 seconds. Way to go, me. So start where you are, but get to a place where, yeah, you're lifting weights and you are absolutely helping build that bone, that muscle density, because that's what helps build bone density alongside things like your progesterone and protein intake. They all work together. But yeah, in your menstruating years, you have all of these extra helpers to stockpile cardiovascular health, bone health, muscle health, all of these things, stockpile, like be a little greedy capitalist hoarder and stockpile your health for longevity throughout those aging years. So I just kind of wanted to interject that because I feel like I needed to be hit over the head with that information over and over and over again before I took it really seriously. So I'm here to hit you over the head with it until we get there.
No, I love that. So, so important. And I think something else to think about, we talked about this in our thyroid episode where we shared our personal story. Protein is essential for your thyroid health too. And your thyroid regulates so much in your body, metabolism, energy, all of it, right? So that powerhouse needs a lot of protein as well. And this is something that, you know, with having Hashimoto's and hypothyroidism, I'm really, really mindful about the protein and that window, right? So I wake up, I take my thyroid medication, and then sometimes I usually don't make it that full hour, to be honest. I know you're supposed to wait, but I usually within 35, 40 minutes, I'm like starving. And I used to think that waking up and being hungry was not a good thing in my 20s. I don't know where I heard that, but they're like, oh, if you wake up hungry, that's not a good thing. Where now I know that if I don't wake up hungry, there's usually a stress response associated with that, which makes a lot of sense for where I was in my 20s in New York City and what I was doing with my life. And now waking up, feeling that hunger and knowing that my body like wants to eat, is ready to eat. And when I do wake up randomly, sometimes not hungry, I take some extra breaths. I do a little bit of a meditation. I really try to get my cortisol and my stress and my nervous system feeling a little bit better, because I know now when I wake up like that, it's not a good thing, not even necessarily, but it's not a good thing.
That's such a good insight. I love that. Thank you for sharing that, because that is really absolutely 100%. And it's not something that we talk about as a sign very often. Like I don't see that floating around. So that was amazing. I love that. All right. So what are some of your favorite ways? So we're going to do episodes in the coming month or so where we're going to dive into breakfast and lunch and snacks and all of these different meals that we can make better through adding in some more good stuff. So today we just wanted to give you a little bit of a starter on getting some protein in, because it does take time and you're not going to overhaul every meal of your life every day immediately right out of the gate, because you'll fail. That's just not sustainable. So what's some of your favorite ways to take those first steps into getting more protein in?
Well, I think something that's really interesting to think about is the amount of protein. Like, what does it actually look like? Because it's really hard in your head to be like, okay, 90 grams, 100 grams. I actually, for myself, was using MyFitnessPal for a little bit of time just to track macros, just to see how much protein I was actually eating, because I thought I was eating a lot and I was still missing the mark a lot.
Yeah.
Because 5 eggs is 30 grams of protein, and there's no way I can eat 5 eggs at once. Like that's too much eggs for me. So most people, and I think we should preface it again, like you mentioned, if you're not eating a lot of protein, you want to slowly, gradually increase so you're not feeling overwhelmed and or too stuffed, right? Because you want to get your body used to that. But I think for me, when I was really trying to hone this in even more this past year, I did track a little bit in a very kind and loving way. But I was like, okay, how much am I actually getting in terms of my macros? And that was really, really helpful because it was really insightful. But, 3.5, 4 ounces of meat is about 30-ish grams of protein. So that was my first step. It wasn't even necessarily adding it in. It was more like tracking what I was doing to see where I was missing the mark. And sometimes if I am less hungry, then I know that I need a little bit more snacks throughout the day, that like nuts and protein and things like that. But that's what I did first, honestly. So if anyone's looking for the first step and you're not even really sure how much protein you're getting, it's a free app. It's one of the easiest things. It's not 100% accurate, obviously, but they did add a new function on the app where you could take photos of what you're eating. So that might be interesting too. And they do the math, I guess, on their end, or the algorithm does it on their end. So if you want to do it that way, but that was my first step, was like, okay, I think I might be eating enough. Am I? No. Okay. How can I add some more in? What makes a little bit more sense? So it was like adding some more cashews into my breakfast, or my seed cycling, my eggs. And again, it's hard for me to finish my breakfast, and I'm not mad at myself for that. I'm like, okay, we'll just make sure that maybe in an hour or two you finish your breakfast, or maybe you have a little bit of a snack or something like that to kind of help get that protein in.
Yeah, I like that a lot. Those are great suggestions. I knew I wasn't eating enough, right? So as soon as I realized that 2 eggs is not 30 grams of protein, I was like, well, I'm definitely out. So I didn't need to even look. I was like, no, I know I'm under. But I also, like you, I was like, well, I can't do 5 eggs. I can't even do eggs sometimes. So when I hit deep luteal and menstrual, it's just too much for me. I end up going with a buckwheat bowl instead on those days. So I do switch between animal and plant proteins in my cycle. My cycle just craves different things, which is funny because it's very opposite for breakfast as the rest of my meals. Because in follicular, I then would want like a leafy green salad for lunch, or hummus sandwich, or, and beans and rice and stuff like that for dinner. Whereas in deep luteal and menstrual at dinner, I'm like, give me a burger, just steak. Thank you. Get out of my way. I have this once or twice a month desperate need for like real bison, buffalo, some like really good red meat. But if for whatever reason in the mornings I flip. And so I definitely was like, okay, how am I going to do this now? And I just broke out my kitchen scale and started weighing stuff. So I figured out that I could have my 2 eggs, I could have 2 strips of turkey bacon, and then I could have a little sprinkle of my seed cycling. So a lot of times right after I have breakfast, I will have a smoothie so that the protein from breakfast helps to mitigate the sugars. And then I'll just throw my seed cycling seeds in there along with like a handful of almonds or whatever to add a little extra protein in there, almond milk or something like that. Yeah. So I just went, okay, well, I definitely need to add more. What's something that I like that I will eat? And then I can just pop that in alongside. So still doing 2 eggs, but then I was putting some smoked salmon in with it and having a slice or 2 of turkey bacon alongside of it or something like that. So I was kind of figuring that out. The buckwheat bowl was a little bit harder for me. And I still don't know that I necessarily got myself up to 30 grams of protein on those days, but I did go, all right, well, I normally add nuts to it, but let me add another handful instead of just 1. And so I just sort of upped those nuts and seeds in the bowl to help bring it up a little bit. And then just also, you give yourself grace. So that's just a time of the month that's tough for me. And, forcing myself to do something that doesn't feel right in that moment is not a good way to go either. So I just kicked back and went, all right, well, if breakfast is tough on those days, but essential, it's really a huge part of keeping the cramps at bay is having a steady stream of food, nourishment. So I went, okay, well, it doesn't have to be a breakfast. I can have breakfast and then I can sit down with my nut mix as a snack. And then I can have my smoothie with my seed cycling seeds in it. And then I can have a burger for dinner because that's how my body craves in that phase. So I just want, okay, well, if we have to flip it around so that I feel good, then that's what we'll do. And then the rest of the time, yeah, it's actually not been too hard to add in that protein in the morning. And one of the things actually, when I was doing the research for the blog that I found was collagen. just mixing some collagen in with your morning tea or beverage of choice, though we do say to save the caffeine for after your food. But, throwing some collagen in there is a really easy way of upping your protein intake without having to make any major change. Just throwing a scoop or two. Now, you need to make a good quality collagen powder, but if getting a good collagen powder is the easiest way to add a little bit of protein without having to make any massive changes right out of the gate. And I feel like can sometimes be a real lifesaver when you're especially a busy person getting up first thing in the morning, your kids, whatever you have to do to get out of the house. Sometimes that can be huge.
Definitely. And even when I make overnight oats, I put collagen in there. And so my boys have a little bit more protein too. You can also make oatmeal, and we'll talk about this on our breakfast special episode, with eggs.
Yeah.
So whenever I am craving, especially in the cooler months, I want hot oatmeal, I'll basically crack an egg and cook my oatmeal with an egg in it. And the boys can't even taste it. You can't even taste it. It's just like makes it a little bit more, I don't even know what the word I'm looking for. Like, I'm like, oh, what's that word? Yeah, I'm like opening my hands, like just
tactile,
like full. That's not even what the word I'm looking for, but it just has more substance. Yes, more substance, satiating.
Yeah. I can see that. It is a good binder, so I can see it being something that kind of adds that
adds a little bit of substance. Yeah, and I feel more satisfied when I'm eating my oatmeal like that too.
Oh, that makes sense. I love it.
Yeah.
Brilliant. So obviously we're going to have episodes on the different meals and ways to up the everything factor that can help with your menstrual cycle as we do those, protein being one of the things that we'll definitely be talking about. Anything else before we close off this episode?
I think the number one thing that we want to just really stress the importance of is just being gentle with this. Yes, we all need more protein. You don't have to make major changes overnight. Like, slowly integrate more so that your body doesn't feel like what's happening mentally and physically, right? Like, you might feel really full and it might feel really challenging. So give yourself grace. If you only feel like you're getting 30 grams and you get to 50, like that's huge, right? So just slowly integrate it in, but just remember every day the importance of it and how essential it is for longevity and also right now hormonal.
Yeah, I dig it. Well, thank you everyone for listening. We will see you in those future episodes talking all about food and being super nerdy as always. In the meantime, let us know how your protein experiment is. Let us know, right? So first step, are you even getting enough? Shoot us an email, slide into the DMs, let us know where you're at. If you have questions, as always, just feel free to ask. Don't forget to rate and review, and we will see you in the next episode. Bye for now.
A big shout out and thank you to our sponsors for today's episode, Period Coaching School and Katie Bresek Wellness.
Thanks to you, our favorite bestie, for listening to the Period Besties Podcast, where no topic is TMI. And of course, share this episode with your besties.
Remember to leave us a 5-star review, nothing less than the best for us besties, and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts.
You can follow us on Instagram at Stasha Washburn and at Katie Bresek, or email us at periodbestiespodcast@gmail.com.
Check out more about us at katiebresek.com and periodcoachingschool.com. And of course, check the show notes for free goodies and extras that support this episode.
We'll see you on the next episode.
Bye for now, besties.